I can't do it. Okay. We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. F it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
And we welcome you in Tuesday, January 21st. It's another episode of the Daily Puck Drop. We do it every single day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Thank you for watching or listening wherever you are watching or listening. Maybe you're listening live, watching live, or taking in later. On YouTube, X, we go live every day at 10 a.m. When you're on the YouTube channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. And then, of course, if you're listening later on all the podcast channels, please rate and write a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, we have got everything up there at pucksports.com. All right, we got a busy show for you today. It'll be real quick. One of our earliest guests, Larry Stone. I caught up with Larry earlier today to talk about Ichiro. So we're going to hear from Larry Stone, longtime Seattle Times columnist, on Ichiro Suzuki going into the Hall of Fame today. An official announcement will come at 3 o'clock. The only thing up for debate is whether he's going to be unanimous. Larry covered, of course, Ichiro right when he stepped a foot over here from Japan, and has interviewed him many, many times. So we'll get some insight from Larry Stone coming up in just a few minutes in our conversation that we had earlier this morning. Danny Kelly will stop on by at 10:30 today, talk NFL playoffs, Chiefs fatigue, anything and all things National Football Leagues. We're championship weekend coming up this week. The Ground Puck podcast with Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree will come your way at 11 o'clock, and we'll get the very latest what's going on with the OC search. Also, a column written today by Tim Booth's colleague over there at the Seattle Times in terms of the heat now being turned up on one John Schneider. So we'll get into all of that. All right, we are broadcasting from the Puck Sports Studios. We do it every single day. It is built by Limback Lumber Contractors. They got free deliveries, everything from whole house packages to homeowner DIY projects. Largest stock moldings in the Northwest. Old school service because they've been doing it since 1930. Call Limback Lumber today, 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbacklumber.com. Also, follow everything on the social media platforms, X and Instagram, Puck Sports. Also on Blue Sky there as well, if you're over there. Hey, we're still on TikTok. We put all of our show content clips up on TikTok, Puck_sports. Also, sign up to be a Puck's Posse member. You join the community. That link on the QR code, if you're watching it, will take you right there. Also, go to pucksports.com. You want full access to all the content. Don't want to miss a thing. Become a full member. Full members get full access and VIP content and the support of Puck Sports. Sign up and join today for as little as $5. Okay, real quick on the national championship. First of all, if you're one of these dopes that had the Irish plus 8.5, what a kick in the nuts that was, all right? Just an absolute kick in the nuts. You go from it's a blowout and thinking, well, I got no chance to make up and I bet $50. I got no chance to make up my $50. And then all of a sudden, here they come. Here come the Irish. Here comes Rudy. Here comes the Four Horsemen. They get the score. They go for two. They get it. I mean, after the last field goal, when they missed it, when I'm yelling at my TV, go for it, like everybody else, and I'm thinking, oh, great. So it's officially over. Then they, for some reason, Ohio State just sits on the football, gives it right back to them. They march right down the field, thinking this is great. All right, I don't care what happens here. Just don't give up a big play. Let them have a first down. Let them pick up 11 yards? Let them pick up the 11 yards. Because if they get the first down, it's over anyways. It's just over. So let them have the first down, but don't give up a big play. And what do? A frickin' big play to Smith, catches it. Now they're in field goal range. Now I'm yelling at Day, don't go for the field goal. Don't risk the block. Send the unit out For a half second, it looked like he pushed it right, and then it curls back in. So for all those out there, idiots like me, we took one in the nuts yesterday with the Irish and the 8.5. College football season's over. Real quick, too long. It's just way too long. The fact this started before September, before Labor Day, and we're ending January 21st. I saw a note from Joel Klatt on Twitter yesterday, and he's right. I don't know how they'd work out the schedule, figure it out somehow, but the season needs to end January 1st. Like, college football has always owned January 1st. Like, that's been the day for college football. And they need to own that day. That needs to be their day only. Because you wake up and there's nothing else going on until the NFL wants to probably creep in on that. But as of now, it's college football's day. And it's not going to fall on a Saturday, but I do find it funny that we play most of these games all year long on a Saturday, and then the national championship game's on a Monday night. And I get it. They want to be alone because of the NFL and their schedule and all that. But the NFL plays most of their games on Sunday, and the Super Bowl, I don't know, it's on a Sunday. I know most of us want it on a Saturday, but we make the national holiday a Monday, and we're all good. But I don't know. It lacked buzz last night and juice. And, you got two high-profile programs. But I don't know. I just thought from the get-go, it just didn't have the buzz of a big game. I think a lot of that had to do with the broadcasters. I thought Fowler and Herbstreit were just mediocre. I thought the pregame was mediocre. It just didn't have like a big game feel to it. And I don't know if it's because the season's so long, fatigue of these storied programs. I don't know. I mean, I generally like the Mount Rushmore teams playing in the championship games, but I don't know. I just don't think Fowler and Herbstreit delivered the quality that you want from broadcasters. You got Herbstreit crying afterwards and then trying to tell everyone how objective he is, and then he's bawling that his alma mater won. You can't at one side of the mouth say, hey, I'm objective as they get. And then you have to leave off camera to cry that your alma mater won. So I don't know. It lacked a big game feel, I thought. I don't know how most people felt, but it just didn't carry the same juice. Last year was a different story because you got Washington in it, so there's so many more people here involved. But I felt that the juice was across the country. I think people didn't feel it. So college football season's over. Next week we'll get more in with the season winding down with John Canzano. He joined us yesterday from Atlanta, the site of the national championship game. All right. This is a huge day in Seattle sports. It's a huge day in baseball, but here, Ichiro Suzuki is going to go in the Hall of Fame later today. The only thing that remains with Ichiro is, will he be a unanimous selection? As of right now, Ryan Thibodeau, who not Mr. Tibbs used to be on Twitter, now he's on Blue Sky, by the way. He does all the Hall of Fame tracking. He updated it 9:34 this morning. As of now, 53.1% of the ballots have been accounted for. Ichiro right now is on every single ballot. It's 100%. Felix is at 24%. So the big question is whether or not Ichiro is going to be unanimous selection. He'll be only the second player behind Mariano Rivera. He'd be the only, clearly the position player to be unanimous selection. There'll be someone that will leave him off, or two or three, but regardless, he's going in, and it's going to be a big win. So I caught up with Larry Stone earlier today just to talk about Ichiro's career, what he meant to the city, what he has meant to baseball, from one of the best in the business, who has covered a lot of baseball for many years, Larry Stone of the Seattle Times. Big day for baseball fans. The announcement of the Baseball Hall of Fame will be made later this afternoon. We know for sure one person's getting, and that's Ichiro. And we're going to see what percentage of the vote does Felix Hernandez get. Well, helping us to break it all down, of course, the legacy, Ichiro going into the Hall of Fame. We'll see if he's unanimous. Is the great Larry Stone, formerly of the Seattle Times, now retired. He's writing, he's running. Last time we chatted with him, he was playing lots of golf. Are we still playing lots of golf? Well, it's the winter, though, time now. But
well, I went 4 times in December, so and even once or twice in January. I have a friend, Don Shelton, who's actually the sports editor, my sports editor at the Seattle Times, and we're determined to golf through the winter. So anytime there's a halfway decent day, we go out.
Good for you. Good for you, Larry. Well, it's been a minute since we've chatted, but I wanted to get you on to talk about Ichiro going in the Hall of Fame. To formality that he'll go in. The only thing will be how much will he go in by? Because there's this little game that you Baseball Hall of Fame writers like to play where they can't be unanimous. There only can be one person unanimous. That will be a big topic coming out later today, is whether or not he'll get a unanimous pick. Do you think he will? Or do you think there'll be one or two people that leave him off?
Well, I doubt he will be unanimous just because there's always one crank or oddball or idiot or whatever you want to call him who doesn't. But as with Griffey, he fell 3 short. Jeter was 1 short. Rivera, of all people, was the first and only so far unanimous. But I can't imagine he will have more than 3 non-votes, Ichiro. And to me, I look at it a little differently, maybe because I'm loyal to the Baseball Writers Association, having been a past national president and a member for almost 40 years. But, if you have a voting body of 500 people and the person gets 99.8% of the vote, I think that the voting body has done its job pretty well. So, I wish there's lots of players who should be unanimous, especially back in history, like the Mazes and the Aarons. But, if it's 99.8%, I don't think that there should be, wailing and riots in the street or anything like that.
But wouldn't you want, I don't think the people that, the 3 that did not vote for Griffey, they never revealed themselves, correct?
Correct. And I spent way too much time trying to find who it was by, means of, almost became a private investigator, and I couldn't do it. And because when you get your ballot, you can check a box that says that your vote becomes public, and most people do. I'd say 90%, but there's about 10% that choose to keep it private, and those are where the non-votes usually come from. Yeah. And so it's almost impossible to figure out who they are if they don't reveal themselves.
Well, I'd like to. I agree with you. He probably will not be unanimous, and I would love to I just would love to hear why. Like, why are you leaving him off? I'm just curious. He's going to get well north of 90% anyways, 95%. But I would just be curious. Like, what's your issue for leaving him off? I want to go back. He 2001, right? He comes onto the scene. We've heard of Ichiro, right? It's a name, and everyone is aware, of him coming over. No impact from a position player in Major League Baseball. He's the first one to come over. When you laid eyes on him for the first time down in Peoria at spring training, and then anticipating what 2001 was going to be like, what did you think he was going to be? Did you think it was going to be, hey, he's going to win the MVP, he's going to win the Rookie of the Year, and he's going to have this Hall of Fame career? Or did you sense some skepticism at all?
There was definitely skepticism, Puck, and much of it was in the Mariners clubhouse, and much of it was in the manager's office. Lou, it's become a legendary Ichiro story, but for the first couple of weeks of spring training games, he was hitting. He wasn't pulling the ball. He was going the other way, not hitting with much authority. And Lou was getting more and more frustrated and skeptical. And he famously called Ichiro in and said, "Hey, you got to show me that you could pull the ball." And I was at this particular game. He launched a home run, his first at bat, onto the berm in right field, and I think he drove a double down the line later that game, and he was off and running. And Lou was like, "Okay, I understand this guy is going to do things differently. He has his own methods, he has his own plan, but he knows what he's doing." And there was still skepticism. He was a slight guy. He wasn't big. In an era when everybody was big, and there was a lot of questions. Nomo had come up and been a huge success with the Dodgers, but there was a difference between a Japanese position player and a pitcher. There was questions about whether they would be strong enough to handle the hard stuff, the 98 mile an hour fastball and all that. And Ichiro just kind of blew that out of the water almost from the start. He got hits in 39 of his first 41 games. I just saw a stat that Quinn, Boggs, and Brett only did that like 5 times in their career, and he did it right out of the gate. So, yeah, he was a revelation almost from the start.
It was. I think people. I remember back then. I think I know for me, and whether you agree with this, it probably sounds like you do. I was just, Larry, taken aback of how good he was. To your point, right away, and just how different it looked. I was so enamored with him slapping at the ball, but almost all the way down the line to first base as he was hitting. It was, I was shell-shocked of just how good he truly was, because there had never been a position player before. And to your point, he wasn't big. And you're like, God, what is all this hype about? But man, it didn't take long to figure that out.
No. And then you learned that he didn't have to hit the ball hard, as you kind of alluded to. He could hit a dribbler and beat it out. He could hit a routine. Players on opposing teams didn't know that method of his of like running as he was hitting the ball and putting up times to first base that were like Mickey Mantle, legendary status. And he beat out a lot of routine ground balls the first couple of months until fielders realized they had to get rid of the ball. They had to play him close. And that led to even more hits, because then he could just slap it by them. David Eckstein, who was the shortstop of the Angels at the time, I was doing an Ichiro story. Once he said, it doesn't matter where we play him, how we move around our defense, he would always hit it where we were, where we used to be. It was almost like he could hit it at will. And he also, of course, had power, and the batting practice exploits of him have become part of his lore. The fact that everyone used to say that he could win home run derbies, but he chose not to do it. And I think he liked people thinking he could win it, and he didn't have to actually prove it.
Remember, it was always he could hit a home run anytime he wanted to. He just doesn't want to.
Right, and I think that was intentional too. He probably could have hit 25 to 30 homers and hit 280, but he wanted to be a guy who hit 300, which he did his first 10 years, and 200 hits his first 10 years. And hits are what he valued most. At the beginning of the year, he said that his goal was to have the most hits in the league, or as many hits as I can. It wasn't home runs, it wasn't power or anything like that. It was just hits, and he had so many different ways to do it.
When do you think was recalling back in 01, and maybe it was in spring training, maybe it was earlier in the season? Was there? You mentioned before, hey, Lou was a little skeptical, like everybody was. Was there a moment where Lou was like, oh God, maybe it was what you were just described. He starts pulling the ball, all the time in spring training. But was there another moment where he finally realized just what a special talent he had?
Well, I think that sort of the coming out moment, I think, for everybody was the Terrence Long throw. Yeah. And I just looked that up today, and that was on April 11th. So that's how early in the season it was. It was less than 2 weeks into the season. And, everyone thought that was just a routine first to third for Terrence Long. And then Ichiro comes up and guns this, something out of Star Wars, as Dave Niehaus said. And I think that's when the legend of Ichiro really sort of cemented itself. But even on opening day, he had 2 hits. One of them was an infield single, of which I think he had 700 infield singles in his career. I don't remember Lou specifically, other than really that day in spring training when he hit that ball. I think Lou became convinced that day. I think he would tell you that.
Yeah, and as I was asking that question, that's what I was curious if that was his or yours, because that was mine and probably like everyone's when he made that play in Oakland. And then it's accompanied by one of the great baseball calls from just an unbelievable announcer and Dave Niehaus. But when he made that play, because you'd heard about his defense, but it was more about his offense. It was about his hitting. But when you saw that ball and it just never rises above whatever it was, a couple 3 feet, 4 feet off the ground, you're like, oh my God, That's like one of the best defensive plays I've ever seen. And still, to this day, Larry, it's one of the best plays I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was the way that team took off, too. They'd lost, this, but they had lost Randy Jr. and A-Rod in successive years. And they had made it to the playoffs in 2000 as a wild card, but I don't think anybody, Pat Gillett, the GM, will tell you that he had no idea that this team, he thought there were holes, that this team was, a slam dunk to win. And they just kept winning and winning and winning and won 116 games. It was just everything came together. And Ichiro was a huge part of that.
I think about it too. Let's put ourselves in his shoes for a moment, Larry. He's 27. The great pride that country of Japan has. They don't like to be embarrassed. That's a huge cultural thing for them. And for him to come over and knowing what the weight of the country was on his shoulders.
Yeah.
The entire, honestly, Larry, the future of baseball players, there was going to be more after him coming. But the future of other Major League Baseball teams taking a chance on Japanese players was on the shoulders of Ichiro to deliver. Because had he not delivered and been a failure, then it would have been, the position players, Japanese players can pitch, but they can't be everyday players. And then, who knows of the generations of people he inspired, right? The Shohei Ohtanis of the world, just all of them being able to come over and that's an immense amount of pressure that he had on himself.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an underrated aspect of the Ichiro story is, as you well put, how much pressure he faced that year. He talked about it, in subsequent interviews I did with him over the years, particularly at the twilight of his career when he was I went to Miami and did a big story on him when he was with the Marlins. And he was very reflective about that, that he knew what was writing on it. And he never really relaxed that year. He said, he knew that he had to come through. And, eventually, once that first season was over and he was the MVP and the Rookie of the Year, batting champion and all that, then he knew he could make it, and everybody knew he could make it, but it was certainly not a guarantee. And, standing up to that pressure, but he's a guy, he'd been under pressure his whole career because he was an elite superstar in Japan with, I think, 6 or 7 batting titles there before he came over here. So he was used to performing at the highest level, but this was different.
Yeah, and I know we see it, with Ohtani and the media circus that's around him, and it's LA, it's different. But being you covering him back then in the day, I come there and cover and start in 03, right? It's just, and I'd never seen anything like it. The amount of press, not just the American press, but the Japanese press that was around him, that everything was focused in on him. And I used to always think we'd walk in that clubhouse after a game, and I think if I remember correctly, he did the Japanese media first, right?
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. And
but the amount of people that would be around his locker and I'm just like, this guy just doesn't have a moment to himself. It's because so much attention is placed on him. I just thought that is just an amazing burden. And for him to go out nightly and perform the way he's performing is crazy. It's just, it was crazy for me to think of how someone could deliver like that on a nightly basis.
Yeah. And, I think coming to Seattle and coming to the U.S. was kind of, in a way, it was a relief to him, because in Japan, he couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed. And he was fairly anonymous. He could go to a restaurant and nobody would bug him, at least at first. So in some ways, there was an anonymity there that he didn't have before. And I think that helped him. And that's why he spent the off season in Seattle and still does.
Yeah.
He would go back to Japan, but he maintained a place here because he could he's much less of the paparazzi and all of that weren't there for him.
And you think about it too, Larry, he comes over at 27. He still amasses over 3,000 hits. If you combine his hits in Japan, he's got, 4,367. It is like, was he 9 years in Japan before he came over? I think was the.
Well, he was 27, like you said. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember if he started when he was 18.
But it's just, it's the whole package. I mean, in the 10-time Gold Glove, winner, he was a 10-time All-Star. The one thing that, the company that he holds with, like, I think Ricky Henderson, Paul Molitor, and Lou Brock, right? The only four players, or one of four players in the last 100 years that have got, 3,000 hits and 500 stolen bases. And yet he's this amazing figure and sports figure. But I wonder, like, there is a lot there too with him, right? Did the public get to know him all that well, right?
Yeah.
Did we get an insight into him? He's unlike any other superstar we've had in Seattle, because there was this relationship with the fans that felt, I don't know, maybe distant, in terms of we didn't fully get to know him, but then we would get a little bit of glimpses into his humor from his teammates. You're like, God, I want more of that. But he was very calculated how much he wanted to show and certainly share.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'll get back to that in a second. But when you were listing off his accomplishments, there's also the major league hit record, which I think gets underappreciated. That's a major record. I mean, it was George Sisler in the 1920s. I was just looking today at the top 10 hits seasons in major league history, and there's Ichiro at the top, and then there's 8 batters from the 1920s or earlier. And then there in 10th place is Ichiro with his other 240 hit season in 2001. So, he has 2 of the 10 leading hit seasons, and the other ones are a total different era, a different beginning of the previous century. So, I think that should be a major part of his legacy as well. But as far as getting the public to know him, I agree absolutely, because we'd see flashes of it. He had a wry sense of humor. He could be biting, but he always chose to use the interpreter, and something would invariably or inevitably get lost in the translation. And it also depended on which translator. There were the years that he had all his great quotes, Cleveland and all that stuff, was when he had one particular interpreter. And then in other years, he had interpreters who I think kind of dumbed him down a little bit, and then he stopped having great quotes. But, I think a lot of people resent him for that. I understand he didn't want to, he didn't want it to be misinterpreted, I guess you could say, by trying to speak in English and not convey himself the way he wanted to. So that's what he chose to do. You could criticize it if you want. I always respected that and didn't have a problem with it. But and I remember when he got traded to New York, the Mariners were in New York right after that. And so a few of us, I was on that trip, and a few of us went into the Yankee clubhouse of Shannon Drayer and me and maybe Greg Johns. And Ichiro was there, his interpreter wasn't, and we chatted with him in English for about 5-10 minutes. He was great. So I think that ability was there, and probably to a greater extent now that he's been in this country for 2 decades plus. So
he's gonna have a wonderful speech in the summer. He will. He's very funny, as you know. He'll mix in some great lines, and he'll be and he's a great historian of the sport. He appreciates the history of baseball very much. What do you think? Last thing for you, his legacy, not just with the Mariners, but legacy on the sport in baseball. In all encompassing.
Well, we talked about one part of it, just definitely as a pioneer and paving the way for other Japanese players, Shohei Ohtani, at the forefront of that. I think he sort of showed that there's a different way to play the game too, at an era. I mean, that was the height of the steroids era, 2001, when, not that far removed from Bonds and McGuire and Sosa and all that. And he showed that there is an entirely different way to play the game that could be just as compelling as that, and one that I think a lot of people would like to see come back nowadays, when it's the 3 true outcomes: strikeout, home run, walk. It kind of I think people are kind of done with that. And I think people want to see a guy who could put the ball in play, get a triple, run around, all that kind of stuff that you don't see much in baseball today.
He played a very unique style. He had a unique style. He had a unique style of play. He was unique, and it was fun to watch him up close and personal, to see one of the greats in the history of the sport. And you got a chance to cover him as well. Larry, appreciate the time today. A Hall of Fame announcement coming out later today, and we'll catch up real soon. Oh, shoot, I almost forgot to ask you about Felix Hernandez. What do you think Felix gets? What your best guess? He's on what percentage of the ballots you think later this afternoon?
Well, I've been very pleasantly surprised by, the Hall of Fame tracker that Ryan Thibodeau does that's become invaluable, where people reveal their votes to him. It's not all the votes, but it's, maybe 50%. And he's clocking in at 20 to 25%, Felix is. And, I was afraid he was going to be one and done, which if you don't get 5%, you're off the ballot the next year. And that's what happened to Johan Santana, whose career is really very similar to Felix's, very similar. And Johan was like one and done, but Felix is checking in at 20%, so he's going to stay on the ballot, I think. It's a long shot, though, I think, for him to get in. You've got to get to 75%. 20% is not a bad jumping off point. Edgar, if you're on the ballot for 10 years, 5 years in, Edgar was at 27%, and it looked hopeless. And he ended up getting 80% his final year and coasting in. So maybe there'll be this upward ascension for Felix, but I think it's going to be a long road for him.
Yeah. Well, I hope it would be great at one day, and it'll be probably the longevity of it, right? Is just not being able to sustain that long period of success. He certainly at a period of time was without a doubt one of the most dominant pitchers there in baseball. Just like you were one of the most dominant column newspaper people in all of the business. Larry Stone, formerly of the Seattle Times. All right, go back on the golf course, all right?
All right, 4.
Thanks, Larry. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Big thanks to, again, Larry Stone for joining me earlier today talking about Ichiro Suzuki, who, again, will go into the Hall of Fame later today. 3 o'clock is when the announcement will be made. We'll just got to figure out, what is he going to be? Is he going to be a unanimous selection? As he pointed out, Ryan Thibodeau, who's been doing this for a while, tracking all the votes. The latest one he did about an hour ago has him on 100% of the ballots. But there's some cranky SOB out there that does not want him to be a unanimous selection. All right, we go from baseball to the NFL. We're going to talk all things playoffs coming up right now with Danny Kelly from The Ringer. But before we do that, let's get a word from one of our sponsors, one of the best in the business, Georgetown Brewery.
Drink Georgetown Tavern Beer, your new locally brewed domestic-style lager. 4.2% alcohol. Cheap, good, local.
That's right. That describes us. Cheap, local, and good.
I like
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Danny Kelly. Follow him on Twitter and Blue Sky at Danny B. Kelly, senior staff writer at The Ringer. He hosts The Ringer Fantasy Football Show along with his buddies. Also, the Ringer NFL Draft Show. And again, our segment brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Go visit georgetownbeer.com. Danny Kelly with the old school Seattle Supersonics hat. He's all things Seattle sports. So how many people do you think, let me ask you a question before we get into football, baseball. How many people do you think leave Ichiro off? He didn't quite do enough to be in.
I have no idea when it comes to Hall of Fame voting for baseball. But I personally think he should be a Hall of Famer. I'll say that.
You know what? Hold on. Let me just write that down.
I am pandering to my base. No, but I really do. Like he was unbelievable. This is my argument. A whole generation of kids tried to model his batting stance. To me, that's enough to get him into the Hall of Fame. You remember this? Like the whole thing where he's stretching and he like holds the bat up and like looks at the pitcher and does his little like tug. Yeah. I mean, when you get an entire generation of kids in a region, maybe even like the country, obviously also in Japan, just emulating a guy, come on, That's enough for me.
Remember they did a commercial about it. I mean, he had a whole commercial when, back in the day when they did those of people imitating him and his stance and everything.
I mean, I remember doing it, playing wiffle ball, just going out there and like going left-handed. I'm right-handed, but I bat left-handed. Just emulate the Ichiro thing. He was just awesome.
It's funny. I just think, Hall of Fame, it's kind of the same thing. It's like the NFL, right? I always think you just know if he's a Hall of Famer or not. I think you just ask this person. You give a name and your immediate answer.
Yeah.
I think to me is usually like the correct one. It's like Mike Holmgren. Mm-hmm. Like that's been the big debate around here. Is he going to get in? If you say Mike Holmgren, well, yeah.
It's like you remember the quote back in the day. I don't even know what the context was totally, but it's like pornography. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
Oh, I know when I see it.
I think that's the same strategy you should use in picking Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
I don't know. He was one of the most defining players of his era, I think. Of course, that's biased for me coming from Seattle, but he was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Danny's here. We'll talk all things NFL. Just a crazy weekend of football in those divisional round games. Are you a snow fan? Are you an elements fan? Because that was a big topic over the weekend.
Yeah.
God, I don't like the elements. I want everybody inside. It ruins the sport. Where does Danny Kelly sit on the elements debate?
I am kind of in the middle. I know that's like not really what you're looking for. I want a hot take here, but I would say here's my genuine, real opinion. It's annoying as fuck when it's in the fantasy season because it ruins their stats and you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know what, like, if it's going to be 100, like if it's going to be, 100 degrees or whatever, that's like a thing. If it's going to be 30 mile an hour winds, it's hard to deal with that in fantasy. Like, do we downgrade these guys or whatever? I think it's super annoying from a fantasy point of view. In the playoffs, I think it's kind of fun. There's a nostalgia to it where you're like, oh, this is old-timey football. This is how it was designed to be played. It's supposed to be outside. It's supposed to be in the elements. You play rain or shine, and I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle. I would say from a fantasy analyst point of view, it's annoying, but the season's over, so I don't care now.
People were angry.
Yeah.
There were some people that were really worked up about it. This is
been
not
like
how
this
a game should be decided. I'm like, we've been playing football outdoors forever.
Like since the 1930s, this is how they've done it. I don't really understand why it's like a new thing.
Like, I guess the weird thing is I thought at times that the Rams looked better in the conditions than the Eagles did.
Yeah.
I mean, some moments of it. I mean, obviously Barkley didn't seem all that affected by it, but like, did the weather cause the Rams to lose? I mean, the Eagles are a better team.
Right.
They won. They should have won.
I think, the only thing I could say is just in terms of you play the entire season with a dry football, and then in the playoffs, it's like this slippery thing that's like, it's like greasing up the basketball before you play in like in an NBA game or something. It is kind of like a weird concept that they play for most of the season, and it's like pretty normal weather and normal conditions. And then as soon as you get to the playoffs where everything matters, it's like, oh, by the way, we're going to introduce this other thing that completely changes the game, completely changes fundamentally the football game. I understand from that point of view, but I think also this is how they've always done it. I don't understand why they would want to change now.
I love it. When that snow came, it was the best. I love them all slipping out there, slipping around, not getting a hold of the football. It's awesome.
When they like catch a pass and slide for 15 yards.
I mean, when they came out there and they attempted like a field goal or the extra point and all the linemen are out there, wiping away the snow.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I love the new graphics that CBS had.
Oh, like
was it
CGI,
CBS or Fox? Yeah.
Where they put the field markers on the field.
That was great. It was awesome.
I will say it's I don't know. I understand people's point of view that they don't like it. But I think at the heart of football, at the heart of fantasy, at the heart of everything that we do in like this sport, variance is a huge thing.
Sure.
In football. There's not very many games. There's not very many plays relative to most other sports, and weird stuff happens. And that's kind of the magic of football, I think, too. So I don't know. That would be my defense of it. I kind of like it. I think it's fun. It's memorable, but it does make the actual product sport.
Yeah, but Danny, you don't get fat white men, fans with their shirts off
True.
in the elements.
Yeah.
We're right. If you want to get rid of that, You know what? I don't know. That's not an NFL.
I don't know if I want to live in this country
It's
anymore.
not an NFL I want to get rid of, Danny. I enjoy watching tubbos like me with their shirts off with a beanie on in the snow.
Is that you?
funny
Are
to
you
me.
gonna? Have you ever done that? Gone out into the snow games and like wear
With
no
a shirt
on
off?
there?
No. I'm
Even in
cold.
your prime?
No, I'm cold now. I'm sitting
know.
indoors with a sweatshirt. I'm freezing. I'm
That's
not
how I
built
am.
for those elements.
Those people really are built diff.
Oh, they are. That fan base is built differently.
Yeah.
And now that the Lions are eliminated, now that's my team. I mean, like, I'm all Bills. I mean,
Yeah.
it's weird because I wanted the Ravens to win because me and my son are just huge Lamar Jackson fans.
Yeah.
Huge. And I want him to get that, that whole moniker off of him where he can't win the big one and
Right.
the playoff Lamar and all that. Because I just love Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
But now that they're out, I'm all in on the Bills.
I think I'm rooting hard for Bills Commanders Super Bowl.
Rematch.
I just think they're the most fun teams left right now. I don't know if I'm rooting for the Bills or Commanders more. I feel like in my heart of hearts, I kind of want the Commanders to do it, like a Cinderella story. But I would not be sad at all if the Bills win either.
Yeah, that would be. It was one of the 4 that the Bills lost in a row. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I believe it was the second or third one in a row, or maybe it was the last one. How about I don't know?
So brutal.
Jesus,
4
I just
Super
went.
Bowl
Maybe it was the
losses.
first one. I know it wasn't the first one.
I think
Second, third, fourth.
if I'm remembering correctly, it was either the first, second, third, or fourth one.
The first one was, you know what? We have computers. We can look it up. Jesus. The first one was the Bills. I know that for sure. That's the first.
was
Or
the
the
Bills?
first one was. Excuse me.
They lost to the Giants.
Giants was the first one.
The then Redskins. The Cowboys.
The
and
second
then
one was the
Cowboys.
Redskins.
Yeah. The Washington football team.
You know who the MVP of that game was?
Against Washington?
Yeah.
From
From America's School.
I don't know.
Quarterback Mark Rippon. The pride of Shadle Park High School in Spokanistan.
Wow.
One-time Coug. Yeah, Washington. When Washington beat him, he was the MVP.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very
and
nice.
that was like a team. You're like, I don't even think they weren't even that good. I mean, that was the thing with the Bills. They were better than everyone, probably except for the Cowboys.
Yeah. Well, that's variance. That's why we love it. Maybe.
Yeah.
That's why some people love it.
It's amazing though. I mean, we are if you're a Mariners fan, you're a suffering, baseball fan, but man, I'm telling you, a Bills fan, can you just imagine?
I can't imagine anything
4 straight
worse.
years losing in the Super Bowl.
I'm a strong believer that expectations are sometimes really bad. Like they can be like the worst thing. Like hope is a terrible thing. Like not having hope.
Hey, this is this is the whole theme of Shawshank Redemption.
That's what I'm saying.
Jeez.
That hope can be a terrible thing. Sometimes the worst of things.
Yeah.
I like to go the other way with it because when you have that hope and we have that expectation, losing just feels that much worse. And man, I cannot imagine anything worse than going to 4 straight Super Bowls and losing all of them. That is unbelievable. I can't it's so much worse. It's so much worse than just being a bad team. You know what I mean?
It's worse. Like we would acknowledge going to 4 straight and losing is worse than what the Seahawks fan base endured in the second one, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. It's worse than going 20-something years without a playoff appearance. I can't imagine just the disappointment, the wondering what if, the second guessing all the decisions that were made in those games. Man, 4 in a row. Just
Hall
brutal.
of Famers everywhere.
Just brutal. And they got nothing out of it.
Not a damn thing except for fat guys with their shirts off in this. That's the fan base I want. I want that fan base who jumps off pickup trucks onto tables and breaks them and just gets out of control. Where I should know this. Where's the Super Bowl this year?
It's in New Orleans.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
God, they're
going to descend upon the Crescent City.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, New Orleans has no idea what's in store for them if the Bills make it there.
I feel like they've seen a thing or two. New Orleans has. But they're used to this, but
like this?
Yeah, I don't know.
This may be a first for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me the Bills. I want to see it. I want to see them win it. And I didn't think they were going to win that game. Boy, the Ravens at time looked so much better than them, but they just couldn't get out of their own way.
Multiple turnovers, man. That's how you lose in the playoffs. Turnovers.
Well, that's what Pete Carroll, protect the ball. Okay.
Yeah. He might have been onto something, honestly. You never appreciate an artist during his time kind of deal.
Right.
I feel like Carroll might have been onto something with the whole prect the football.
I think so.
Idea.
I'm sad he didn't get the Bears job, Danny.
I am too. I'm holding out hope for this Raiders thing. I don't
Yeah.
know if he wants to go there or not, but the Pete Carroll experience in Las Vegas is kind of a funny thought, but I don't know. Yeah, I really want Pete Carroll to be a head coach in the NFL because I will immediately just become a huge fan of that team automatically. It is just one of those things where I thought I didn't want him to coach the Seahawks anymore. And now he left. And I'm like, I miss him and I want him to coach someone else because it's like, we have a relation. He changed like Seattle sports forever. So you love him. It's like a Lou Piniella type of deal.
You know what I miss more than anything is him at practice with the two gloves on throwing a football around. just
running around.
And then his cheesy shoes and his khakis and
Air Monarchs.
Yeah, and all his stupid sayings and just all of it.
I mean this sincerely and genuinely. He was like a fan base's psychiatrist or psychologist. Like his press conferences, his post-game interviews on the radio, it just like put you at ease. It made you feel okay and like with the world, and they're on top of it. They're gonna get these things figured out. We know exactly what we did wrong. Blah blah blah. Like just the way he kind of talked to you, it was like such a calming effect in a chaotic world. So I do kind of miss that.
I mean, I miss his gum, the chewing of the gum and throwing it into players' faces when he was. I don't know.
He's a character, man.
Yeah, he was. Well, we'll see with the Raiders gig. So Ben Johnson getting the Bears job and all that. All right, so you were excited for the championship games. We should have two real good ones. Obviously with the Chiefs and the Bills kind of headlining that in the AFC. It feels like America has reached finally Chiefs fatigue.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Right, because it's very similar to me. I don't know if you're a basketball fan or not, NBA fan, but. Like the Chiefs are likable. There's no one like not likable on the Chiefs. At least
maybe they're kicker, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah. Well, I forgot, yeah, because that's right. Because all women need to be in the kitchen cooking.
Right,
Is that Harrison Butker's?
I mean, in a nutshell, yeah.
Well, he's got a point, Danny. I'm just joking.
Okay.
Joking, people.
Trying to get me canceled here.
No, joking. But it reminded me of the Warriors. Like I would watch the Warriors, and I gravitate to the Warriors because of Klay Thompson.
Yeah,
and they're winning all these championships. They're in the they're in the NBA Finals every year, and then eventually people just got sick of them. Like, yeah, well, what's annoying about them? They're all likable. The head coach is likable. I guess Draymond Green's not likable.
There's one specific guy that maybe is the most likable.
Fair point, but for NFL fans, it feels like we've reached it with the Chiefs, right?
Oh, I totally agree. We were talking about that on the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, my podcast.
Where you can find it? Where can you find it?
You can find that on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We were talking about that the other day. Basically, I think there's an inflection point on that exact play where Patrick Mahomes sort of like slowed down as he was going out of bounds and then flopped into the sideline trying to draw a foul. And everyone's like, okay. I think, the old Jerry Seinfeld meme where he gets up in the theater and he goes,
That's
okay.
it.
Like, I think that was like the moment where everyone was like, okay, I'm fucking tired of this.
I'm with you on that. When he did that, I'm like, kind of like, hey, maybe he's not really slowing down when he's doing this stuff and lay off him. And I really don't think the officials are trying to benefit the Chiefs, but when he did that, and I think Aikman wanted to take off the headsets and run down there and be like, what are you doing?
Aikman hates that stuff. It's so funny.
Well, because his career was
era.
Ended.
Dude, can you imagine playing in that era back then? They didn't protect quarterbacks at all. He was tough as nails.
How many concussions did Aikman have?
Man.
Like 50,000?
Seriously, I don't even want to think about that. But I will say, I feel the same way as you. I'm like, if you look at statistically, like the Chiefs aren't benefiting from calls more than any other team in the NFL. I will say, I think Mahomes is protected more carefully or like more strictly than other quarterbacks, especially running quarterbacks. The way you see Josh Allen take hits or Lamar Jackson taking late hits. These guys are not protected at the same level as like a guy like Patrick Mahomes. And honestly, it's like, I get it. He's the face of the league. This is a team that's going for a three-peat Super Bowl championship and losing Mahomes. would change it changed the whole story. So like you have to protect like your stars. I actually do believe that, but I think the way that some of these calls went in this last game, where Mahomes, like, he got that one call where he was sliding late, and then the two defenders kind of just ran into each other.
They hit themselves. You can you get targeting on your own teammate? Because that's what it should have been.
Other out.
Yeah.
That play along with the other one where he tried to get the flop, I think people are just like, okay, this is so annoying. But I also do think it's just like fatigue, like you said. We've seen that the Chiefs every season, literally every season, Mahomes has been a starter. He's been in the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. He's never made it. He's never like gotten eliminated before the AFC Championship game. I think people are just kind of like, it's like the Brady. I think people hated Brady for other reasons, but like the Brady thing is like every year it's the Patriots. I'm so sick of these guys. So sick of like the storylines are always the same. It just kind of gets boring. You just get fatigued on it.
It does, but it's there's been no accusations of cheating, so it's not like the Patriots.
Right.
Andy Reid is
not Belichick.
He's lovable.
Yeah.
The guy dresses up as Santa.
Yeah.
He's stuffing cheeseburgers down his mouth. He's a great pitch man on commercials.
Yeah.
You could sit and have multiple beers with Andy Reid, and I think you like him. I mean, I think the majority of America likes Travis Kelce. Maybe they're annoyed with the whole Taylor Swift thing and all that, but
yeah.
I like.
I mean,
Travis
he has one
Kelce.
of the most famous podcasts, most popular podcasts in the world, in addition to being a future Hall of Fame tight end and whatever. People like him. I still really like Mahomes, honestly. I think it's just I think it really is. I like Mahomes. I think he's one of the greats. It's like experiencing Michael Jordan in his prime. You know what I mean? It's like being in that era. We're getting to see this happen in real time. But the calls are kind of annoying. All this stuff around those Chiefs are kind of annoying. And I just think they're kind of boring this year. They're not a very exciting team. In the heyday of the Chiefs, in the early days of like when they started their dynasty, man, they were one of the most fun offenses to watch, period. This team, it's like Bo Nix is the quarterback. They're just throwing screens. I think he has his lowest ADOT in his career. He's not good on deep throws.
The slowest what?
ADOT, the lowest ADOT, average depth of target. Sorry, that's a fantasy term. The way that the depth
You're
at which
talking
he's
to an
passing.
idiot, Danny. So when you use terminology like that, it goes over my head.
This is how I feel when I'm listening to like baseball conversations and they're talking about like BABIP and things like that. I'm like, I don't know what this
barrel
is
rate percentage.
But no, ADOT is average depth of target. So essentially, he's throwing short very often.
Okay.
At a higher rate than he has ever in his career. It's basically a dink and dunk offense. And so it's also that makes it just much more boring. Mahomes is not the same Mahomes that we've seen for most of his career, where he's, making these absolutely ludicrous downfield throws. I will say it is ironic that the play after he almost flopped out of bounds and people were all pissed off, he made like an incredible touchdown pass.
Oh, the one where he's getting tackled and falling down.
Yeah. Like splayed out like 100, like horizontal. Makes and then flips it up for a touchdown. And this is the type of thing I think people maybe don't appreciate as much as they should or used to, is because all the other stuff that, surrounds him. But yeah, I don't know. I still love Mahomes. I'm kind of sick of the Chiefs.
I am a big fan of history, and I like being in the middle of it. And I think I don't have animosity towards him. I'm going to be rooting for the Bills because I just want to see but the Bills got to deliver. See, here's what I want to know. If the Bills knock off the Chiefs, they better win the Super Bowl. Because what I don't want to see is them knock off the Chiefs and then lose again. That's what I don't want to be signed up for. So I want someone to tell me, look into the future. Yeah, they'll beat the Chiefs, and then they'll knock off the Commanders or the Eagles. Because if they get into the Super Bowl and they lose again, I'm out. I'm just out because I don't want to see them go through it again losing in the Super Bowl. But to do something in this sport which promotes parity, and it's supposed to be the anti, like Dodgers baseball, where you just can't build the best team and spend the most money. You're supposed to not be a dynasty in the NFL.
I mean, it's like college football. You look at Ohio State, like what they're spending, the amount of draft picks they have coming up here, and it's like, oh, a big surprise that Ohio State won the national title. In baseball, and I think I said this on your show. Like, I think literally the best thing about the NFL is the salary cap. It's what makes the NFL because it creates parity. Everything that the league does, from the draft being reverse order, the schedule creators, if you win your division, you play a harder schedule the next year. Everything that you do, the league does, is constructed. And John Schneider said this, is like it sends you back to 8-8. Obviously now there's 17 games, but it's designed to push teams to 8-8. It's so hard to be a really good team year in and year out because of the brain drain. You lose coaches, you lose players in free agency. Players on good teams get valued more highly in free agency. So it's harder to keep your guys. I mean, it's just so hard, and it's such a competitive environment that's what makes the league great, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's why sometimes I wonder. We're seeing it this week with the Dodgers, and people are up in arms about how much money they're spending and all that. And I get it. It's I wonder if MLB and the NBA and these other sports just look at the NFL and go, maybe what they're doing is the right way.
I mean, if they were looking at the ratings.
Maybe we should look at the ratings and so parity's a good thing. Like having a cap is a good thing. Now, I don't think those leagues are ever going to do it, but
it's hard to imagine the MLB with a cap. It's like the whole thing would change. It'd be so different. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's like a big reason I've sort of fallen out of love with baseball over the years. It's just like, I don't know, you can buy a champion team. That just seems so weird to me. I know that doesn't happen every year,
right?
But especially being a fan of the Mariners over the years.
Well, I would like one time for us to buy a championship, and then they can change the rules.
Can't we? Why can't we buy one?
We can. We just don't want to do it.
Just because we don't feel like it? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's just we don't feel
we're just trying to run a profitable business.
Yeah, what I mean? That's all we're trying to do.
That's like so soul sucking in sports. We're just trying to make a profit.
Yeah, it is soul sucking. What about the story of Dan Quinn and the Commanders? What a turnaround! No one had them. No one pegged them to be here, and they're one win away from playing in the Super Bowl. It's stupid.
It is. Yeah, I mean that's a perfect example of a lot of things, but the parity for one. I think the other thing about the NFL that's really cool is just how electric a good quarterback can be, and for your team, like it's so like what Jaden Daniels is doing is unprecedented. Honestly, he might be the best. He might be the most impressive. I don't know statistically if he's the best, but the most impressive rookie quarterback I've ever seen in terms of poise, the way that he changes the offense, the way that they've embraced him in that city, the way his teammates embrace him. They almost believe in him as like a mythical creature. My co-host Danny Heifetz wrote a big feature on the Commanders. He was in their locker room last week and a couple weeks ago, and he's just like, they think he's like their savior. There's almost like a cult-like following for him because they just believe in him so much. And he's like giving them every reason to believe that because of all the game-winning drives he's had this year. Man, I don't know what to think about Dan Quinn. I don't know if it's like what he's doing is like really spurring this or not. I think he's always been a very inspirational players coach. Guys love him. Guys will want to go to war for him. And it's just funny and ironic because during the interview process last year, I think it was like, the Commanders missed out on Ben Johnson. I think he took his name out of the hat for them. Yeah. And then it was sort of like they took Quinn just as a default, like we have to have somebody coach us. And I don't think anyone was super excited about that.
No one really felt, and myself included, it felt like no one in Seattle wanted him.
No. I think our situation was specific too, because it was like, okay, what's the difference between Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn? Maybe it ends up looking, I'm actually really glad they hired Mike McDonald. I'm feeling very bullish about him long term, but it would have been interesting to see how different it would have been if Dan Quinn would have been here. Cliff Kingsbury, Cliff Kingsbury redemption arc is interesting.
It's great. And then I still don't understand, like what I'm amazed with Kingsbury is this, two things. One, how swollen he is, in terms of like the shirt gets smaller and tighter. And then the second thing, those bags under his eyes get larger every week.
It's like being president, man. It's a stressful job.
My God. Like I want to know how many hours he sleeps.
Have you seen Kyle Shanahan's rate of aging?
Yeah.
These guys don't sleep. They probably have terrible like diet, super stressful.
I don't think Kingsbury eats. I just think he pounds like some protein shake and lifts, and some model girlfriend is his exercise at night. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he does anything. But for Quinn, it would have been vastly different here. I mean, it's not like his defense has been lights out.
No, and it's not like, and he wouldn't have brought Jaden Daniels again. Like I love Quinn. I think good for him. I don't think he's the one that's shaping this turnaround. I think it's Jaden Daniels. And credit to Quinn for, embracing it and hiring the right guys. Kingsbury clearly like a good offensive coordinator for Jaden Daniels in terms of like the things they're designing. The run game stuff is super cool. There was like a bunch of criticism early in the season and this is what we saw with him in Arizona, where he would just line up Terry McLaurin on the same side and have him run routes on the same side, literally like 97% of the time. And you know what? Credit to him. He started moving his guys around in the season, and that really helped. So, he's clearly open to learning and changing. And I always appreciate that in a coach when it's like, if something's not working, like don't try and, round peg, square hole, or whatever, square peg, round hole. What is the expression? One of those.
Whatever. You nailed it, Danny. I mean, I think you got it.
Yeah. You get the point. I always feel weird saying that expression. It just sounds vaguely sexual.
It probably was of some sexual nature.
Yeah.
Is I guarantee. All right. A couple of quick hitters before you go. We got to get the barge too. I got a perfect one for the barge. Jeremiah Smith, if he could come out, would he be the number one pick?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like Julio Jones, man. I mean, he's
unreal.
Insane. He was the number one prospect in the country.
Yeah.
Somebody tweeted this last night, and it was so funny. It was I can't remember who it was. It was like Jeremiah Smith was the high schoolers had to guard this guy last year.
Oh,
can you imagine going up against this guy? He would be a number one receiver in the NFL right now.
Yeah, he is unbelievable. Those two backs are good. I mean, Henderson, he gets I don't know if there's a faster running back playing football right now.
I really like Henderson, man. That he has more juice. He's got more juice than almost any running back I can remember.
Yeah,
he's like Gibbs level juice.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
He's awesome. I don't know. I don't think he's as good as Gibbs, but he's got some juice for sure.
Next year, the Eagles, maybe in the playoffs, they got to give that holder maybe a try at catching some passes.
Dude, that's what I said.
Unbelievable.
That was the most impressive thing, individual performance I saw in the playoffs.
He's the MVP of the game.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, the holder for the Eagles in the snow, in the wind, in the rain, or whatever it was, sleet.
All of it.
There was a very key field goal. He did this twice. There was a very key field goal in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And the snap was like a rocket. It was a really hard. He just there's a P-Rod snap, and it was way out in front of him. He had to reach out and just grabbed it.
Snagged
it like it was nothing.
Yeah.
No movement. And then he put it down. It was a perfect hold. I was like, that is the most impressive thing I've ever seen.
It was the best. Braden Mann, I believe, is his name. Yeah, man. He's give him the MVP. Get a larger share than anybody else if they go and win the whole thing. All right, our barge of the week. For those who don't know, every week we put somebody out on one of these shipping container barges that goes out to the Pacific Ocean, and then we just leave it there because they don't get a comeback unless we decide they get a comeback. Most of the times we just leave them out there. God, did I not get the barge sound effect? You stupid idiot. You know what? I'm doing 15,000 different things, and I don't have the barge. Oh, I'm going to get it, Danny. I'm going to
Google a barge.
Yeah, I'm going to get the barge, and I know it's a shipping container, and that's just
it's
the
not
barge.
Even a shipping container. It's a shipping ship.
There it is. There's the barge.
There we go. MSC Carouge.
Yeah, MSC Carouge. We love the barge, all right? The barge is one of our favorites. No doubt that this guy has got to go on the barge, Danny.
Had a drop as well earlier, and for the game
come on.
to go possibly to overtime.
Oh,
brutal.
I don't want to put him on it, Danny, and I'm going to bring him back.
I feel bad.
But he's got to go on the barge.
This is an awful. He also fumbled in the game.
Yeah, look at this. We're going to go to overtime. No.
Freaking brutal.
Shocking.
You know what's crazy about it? It's I think I've had him on my fantasy team for 15 years or whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating. And he's unbelievable. Yeah. He's one of the best tight ends, and he just, the biggest game, and I feel awful for him.
I feel really bad for him, honestly. I'm trying to hold back on being. I've kind of been known in my circles as a Mark Andrews hater because over the years he's had some really embarrassing drops, but
yes, especially in the playoffs, right?
Yeah. And I've kind of been when he dropped that pass, I got 1,000 tweets, talking about how he gives me the ick. But man, I do feel bad for him. Honestly,
Yeah.
He's never gonna live that down.
You can't recover from that. I mean, maybe next year they win the Super Bowl and he has the game-winning catch.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, that would be what it takes at this point. It's like a Bill Buckner type of deal.
Sure. Yeah.
So it sucks. I feel bad for him. Obviously, it's terrible. But that was I mean, man, I would have loved to have seen what universe that we live in where they go to overtime, or we get to see Josh Allen drive back down the field on that play.
Sure.
Man, it would have been a fun way to end the game.
And it changes the narrative on Lamar too, because now Lamar gets lumped in again, can't win the big game. But you know who can win the big game? That's Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly joins us every week from the Ringer senior staff writer, Ringer Fantasy Football Show, Ringer NFL Draft Show. Go check that out on Spotify and wherever you find your podcast. Our weekly conversation talking all things NFL, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Go visit georgetownbeer.com. All right, Danny, we'll talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good.
There he is, Danny B. Kelly. Full episode will be up later on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. When you're there, please hit the ratings button. Go 5 stars. We got to go 5 stars. Like you're going to a Thai restaurant. Go 5 stars. You'll thank me later. And then also, please write a review. Also up on YouTube. We'll place the episode up there on YouTube. When you're there, please subscribe to the program Puck Sports there on YouTube. All right, we got to transition, talk a little Seahawks. They were not with us yesterday. They were very kind to transition to Tuesday because we had John Canzano on yesterday talking college football, previewing the national championship game. Joining us from the Seattle Times, it is Tim Booth. Hello, Tim.
Good morning, Puck. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. And from Fox 13, your trusted source for all news, weather, and sports, it is Curtis Crabtree. Hello, Curtis.
Puck, what's going on?
Hey, Curtis, when are they going to get you on the anchor desk, like just anchoring the sports? I think that's your next step in the evolution and the continuation of the Curtis Crabtree, I will dominate Seattle sports media.
Yeah, I don't need that in my life. Personally, I will leave that to the other people who can more readily be on TV cameras every night than me. No, I'm personally good being the backup fill-in, maybe once a week, come in and analyst and do our show sort of person. That's more up my wheelhouse. You put me in front of a teleprompter and tell me to read it, I am not Ron Burgundy. I suck at that. So, yeah, that's not going to go well for anyone.
There is a skill to reading off the teleprompter. There really is. There's no doubt about that. All right. When watching Tim these games this weekend, and you're casually watching it, maybe you're intently watching it. Can you get a sense of how far maybe the Seahawks are away from being in that round of the playoffs?
Yeah, I would say they're pretty far. I was about to say they're pretty far. They're not pretty far, but there's a gap there. There's a gulf there. And I think, as we've talked about ad nauseum this season, it goes back to where you are with your up front, like the line of scrimmage and the defensive line. I think they're closer to getting to the level of where they need to be to be on par with the teams that are still playing this weekend. But offensive line, I mean, of course, it's the issue that has stuck with them for years and years and years, and for whatever reason felt like it was more amplified this year than maybe in previous seasons. So I think skill position wise, you can make an argument that if you're bringing everything back the same next season or close to the same, you're close to where these other teams are. Like, I would take Seattle's receivers over what Buffalo has at receiver without question. I would take DK and JSN over Khalil Shakur and Curtis Samuel and the ghost of Amari Cooper. But the up front, that's for me, that's where it stood out the most. I mean, you can talk about Geno and the quarterback situation all you want, but if there's no one to block and protect him, it doesn't matter who's back there.
Curtis, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's been a number of games in these playoffs that have been absolutely destroyed by an offensive line being unable to block the other team. I think of the Chargers in week 1. Houston got that some this weekend. Like, you need to be able to handle the line of scrimmage to be able to have your offense function. And with the offensive line, the state that it's been for the Seahawks, there is a firm ceiling with how high that they can get to. and it's right about that 10-win mark. Like there's not much more you can get out of a team when you have that level of a limitation on your roster. So, I do think in general they get just about all they've been able to get out of these teams the last few years, given the struggles of the offensive line and some of the other areas on that roster in previous years. But as long as that's, such a limiting factor for the team, there is a hard cap ceiling on exactly where they could be. They could have been in the playoffs this year, and they probably would have been one and done. But it's not that far of a gap between them and some of the teams playing this weekend. Like, you think that they couldn't stay on a field with Washington? They certainly stayed on the field with Detroit earlier this season. It's a little bit of a matchup thing here and there, but it's not like there's this massive gulf between them. But for a week in, week out consistency basis, like without the offensive line being better than it's been, that there is a ceiling on how far that they can go.
Tim, your colleague over there at the Times, Matt Calkins, stirring the pot. Matt Calkins wrote a piece today titled "John Schneider Faces the Most Crucial Offseason." How crucial do you guys think his offseason is? Tim, you go first.
You actually think I read what my colleagues?
Yeah, you do.
Right?
Of course you do. You support one another. And by the way, go support the Seattle Times. All right?
Yes,
it doesn't
please
cost
support
much.
the Seattle Times. Thank you. Yes, I did read what Matt says. It's funny that I think there's probably not a fan base in town right now that likes their GM or feels great about their GM. Think about it. The Mariners. I mean, Jerry DiPoto. We don't need to say anymore. Kraken fans are pissed at Ron Francis. Sounders fans were even upset at Craig Weibel because they didn't do enough in the offseason. So John Schneider being in a place of maybe some contentiousness among the fan base is just fitting on par with what the rest of the city is kind of feeling toward the other teams in town. But I do think it's an important offseason. It's a really important offseason because this is the first offseason where he gets to make adjustments the way that he wants to make adjustments. In the past, it was okay. They would come off a season with Pete, and it was Pete and John, making the adjustments, and Pete in a lot of ways having the final word on what those adjustments were going to be. Last offseason, there was so much change that there wasn't really the opportunity to see, okay, how is everything going to fit with how Mike wants to do things, and what kind of personnel do we need to have in order to fit that in the best way possible. This is now his chance to do that. This is his chance to go out there, whether it's trade, draft, free agency, whatever route they decide they want to go. This is his chance to match up and adjust to the way Mike wants to play, the style he wants to play, the way the new offensive coordinator that they bring in, how he wants to do things. So I don't know if it's the most important offseason that John has had in his entire tenure with Seattle, but if it isn't, it's probably number 2, because this is his franchise right now. It's his team in a lot of ways, and it's his job to, as Curtis was pointing out, with getting over that 10-win ceiling, finding the way to actually bust through that and get to be more of a contending team.
Yeah, and ultimately, when it's coming off the heels of what they did last season, I mean, their free agent class from a year ago was almost a complete and total write-off with the way that the season progressed. You end up having Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker not make it to midseason with the team. Rayshon Jenkins lost his starting job to Kobe Bryant. Jonathan Hankins was the one regular solid rotational backup piece on the defensive line. George Fant played 30 snaps. Connor Williams retired after being here about 15 minutes or so. Laviska Shenault, Nick Harris, Tremaine Ankrum, Kayvon Wallace. There's nothing out of that free agent class from a year ago that was super sticky and performed all that well for them outside of Hankins as a rotational depth defensive lineman. There's just they have to get more out of their offseason personnel moves this year to fix the holes that they do have. Coming off what they did last year, it's not particularly the most recent instance of him doing it was not the most favorable. So that's kind of what you have at the top of your mind.
It just feels like, right, guys, that this year in particular, I feel that there's been more heat on him from fans and maybe even the media as well on the job he's done. that he's received more criticism this year, Tim. Do you get that sense? And I wonder, I mean, I think the criticism is fair, but it seems like it's being turned up more this year than it ever has been in the past, because maybe you made the point earlier, this is all on him now. I mean, that organization made a choice between him and Carroll, and it was John.
Yeah, for 14 years, 14 seasons, he had Pete to deflect everything. Pete would wear every move, every decision, because at the end of the day, it was Pete's final call, and the way that the structure was set up on how they were going to operate as a football operations staff. Pete was the guy who kind of took the brunt of any criticism or any praise or any criticism that came for a move that they did, whether it panned out great or it became a complete bust. And now you've lost that shield. You've lost that buffer that was there, at least in John's case, that he had with Pete. So there isn't anyone else to point it to. Like Mike's not responsible for it. It's not his job to go out and decide who the free agents are. I mean, he can give opinions, but it's ultimately John's job at the end of the day to go make those moves and make those decisions. So not only I think has the heat turned up a little bit because the franchise decided to go with John rather than Pete, but so the heat's turned up because of that, but then it's also turned up because the moves didn't work, and people can kind of see that, like, hey, he made these decisions and they didn't, in a lot of cases, as Curtis pointed out, they were bust this year. Mm-hmm. And now here comes your opportunity to try and remedy that and become more than just a 9.5 win team like they were this year.
Curtis, if I were going to offer him some advice, actually, you want to follow up on that before?
Go ahead. I can go off this. Go ahead.
If I would offer him some advice, I would tap into him, and I also would tap into anything else. And I would say, that's just no one knows that. Only the three of us and like one other person.
You forgot the point.
Yeah, that's right. Is do more media. I think it would soften some of the criticism. He doesn't do anything. And so I think he's almost like it's the Wizard of Oz behind the screen. Like, he does like what does he do? Like one a year. It's before the draft. Maybe something in the beginning of the year. I mean, I know he does his pregame every Sunday, but he doesn't meet regularly with you guys or the media in general. And I think that's a mistake by John Schneider.
I mean, I would certainly never say no to talking with John Schneider less, on the record. If I was to play devil's advocate on that argument, I would say the fact that where has he been hammered the most about this year is the offensive line, obviously, right? Well, you have the comment from last year. It was last year, right, where he goes, guards are overdrafted and overpaid. And then they have below replacement level guards the entire season. And it's like, well, then what are you going to do to make that right? So, in some regard, I think that has put a little bit of that particular quote from last year, given the struggles of that particular position, is one area where it's been pretty rife to criticism because of what he said about it. But like I said, I would certainly like to talk to John more on the record. I think they're only required to speak X amount of times on the year. I don't remember exactly how many times it is. But because Pete was always the personnel head at the end of the day beforehand, you always felt like you got their position on that stuff more previously. And now that, Mike McDonald is not in that role, it probably would behoove John to speak a little bit more regularly about some of the stuff that they're doing, but I don't know if they will do that.
It's interesting in that John he's put his foot, shouldn't say he put his foot in his mouth, but he's had some moments where he starts getting on a kind of going as he's talking, and he says the things like what Curtis pointed out about guards, or in the past he'll just sort of riff on a thing because he's usually pretty protective about what he tries to say in those public settings, but then he'll keep going, and then sometimes some nugget of truth will. The other thing that's interesting is that they've kind of pushed some of the other guys in the front office out a little bit more in the last year. Nolan Teasley, for instance, assistant general manager, proud Central grad. he's come out and done some media stuff. Matt Berry did some media stuff last year prior to the draft. He's had those guys kind of be a little bit more front and center in the past, 12, 16 months or so. And I don't know if that's, projecting to the future. I don't know if that's trying to get them some more experience or opportunities being in those situations and talking and, learning about how to talk to the media. But at the end, more than at the combine and prior to the draft and post draft picks would definitely, I think, be fans want to hear his voice. Fans want to hear his explanations. And I think in some ways at this point, without Pete there as the mouthpiece, he kind of owes it to them to be out there a little bit more and talking about that.
Yeah, I agree. I want to move on to Byron Murphy. What do we make, Curtis, of Byron Murphy's first year? Because if you did I call him Byron Murphy? Brian Murphy. What am I?
Byron Murphy.
God, am I lying? I'm trying to catch myself if I'm saying his name right. What do we make of his first year, Curtis? Because I think your eyes would tell you that, okay, he played just okay. Now, if you look at his PFF rankings and, if you want to put any stock into it and how much stock you want to put into it, right? There's some truth to it, and then there's going to be probably some skepticism, I think, with those numbers. I mean, he didn't rank all that well. He was 91st, I think, out of all defensive linemen. I think against the run, he was 102nd or 103rd. What did you take away from this year? On a positive note, as a team they were better against the run, and I'm sure he plays a large part into that. But Curtis, how would you sum up Murphy's first year?
I thought it was a fine, if not, super spectacular first season. I think, playing as much nose tackle as he did, that's a spot that's going to be tough to have stats, rack up on a weekly basis to kind of show the level of play that you're having. There's not a ton of times where you have a guy come into the NFL from college as a nose tackle and be dominant as a rookie. I think it's a pretty high bar to clear. I mean, when we were talking about the DK Metcalf discussion a week ago, you do see receivers come in and be able to excel pretty early on. It's far less regular to see that from interior defensive linemen to come in and be able to make that leap immediately and run with it. So I thought there's nothing alarming from his first year to me about the way he played. I think he will make a jump. What are you going to do? Take Leonard Williams off the field in some of these circumstances? They're not going to do that. So it's about finding the right way to get both of them on the field together and making it work to where they can both kind of find that level of success more consistently. There's nothing like I said, there's no alarm bells going off from his first season for me. Would you have liked it to be a little bit more productive? Sure, but I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about from his first year.
Tim Booth, give me a grade for Byron Murphy's first year.
B-. I don't know. We're not all 22 guys, so I'm not breaking down the film and being like, well, he filled the A gap really well and allowed the other defensive tackle to loop over and get pressure. I don't care, but I would be curious to know the one that, as you're talking, the one thing I would be curious to know is how often was Byron on the field and it created an opportunity for Leonard Williams or created an opportunity for Jaron Reed. Those would be the things that I would be curious about from a film analyst kind of standpoint is what did his presence create potentially for others? As an individual, did he stand out? No. But I thought he was fine. I didn't feel like for large chunks of the season he was a problem out there. He didn't stand out, but he wasn't an issue. But what did his presence create for others?
Right.
The other part of it I think will be very interesting to watch going forward is the optics, because who was taking 3 picks after Byron Murphy? It was Jared Verse, who we just saw destroy everybody the latter half of the season and almost win a playoff game for the Rams. Now, obviously different positions, obviously a position that's more in the spotlight, has more opportunity to create disruption. But as you go forward in the future, especially because you play him twice a year, if Jared Verse becomes the next version of Aaron Donald, I know the positions aren't the same, but if he becomes that guy that's torturing you for the next 7 to 10 years and Byron Murphy doesn't develop into being considered one of the elite defensive players that came out of his draft class, you're going to have a problem. The optics of that are not going to look good. But he's a rookie. He's 22. He's got time to develop. You got to give him a little bit of time to develop. So for what he was this year, I thought it was a fine first season.
I think as you were talking, I was just trying to think, was there a wow play, a wow moment? And what first came to mind is just the debate we had last year with Jalen Carter. Do they draft Jalen Carter or not? You go to that playoff game, one of the key plays in that last weekend's game was Jalen Carter sacking Matt Stafford on third down. Yep. I mean, he literally just threw his man out of the way and sacked him. I never saw that this year from Byron Murphy. Not to say, maybe someone's going to say, you're an idiot, here's the play. But I didn't see that type of impact. We'll see, though. We'll see year two what he does. I would, again, just say, not being all 22 guy, they went from 31st in the NFL against the run to 16th. I'm going to assume he played a role into that improvement in stopping the run. All right, last thing real quick. They've got 8 draft picks right now, as of now, for the NFL draft. Do we spend all 8 on offensive line? Has anyone ever done that, Curtis? All 8 picks, everything on an offensive line?
I don't believe that's been done before, no.
Damn it.
And I don't think that would be the wisest plan of action either. I mean, maybe you trade all 8 Ricky Williams style to go up and get the guy you want. But no, as far as using all 8 on one position group, no, I don't particularly see that being the case.
Dang it.
Here's what they need to do. What has John never done? He's never drafted a quarterback. Or they've never since Russell. Draft 8 quarterbacks this year in a crappy quarterback class. Just draft 8 quarterbacks. That's it. Just shut everybody up. You've never drafted a quarterback. Now you just draft 8 of them across the board. Done. No one will ever talk about that again.
Yeah, your Alex Magoo slander will not stand.
That's right.
I'm sorry. Alex Magoo in the 7th round. My apologies to Alex Magoo and all of his supporters out there.
All right.
Is he playing in the CFL now?
Is he in the CFL?
I don't know. I have no idea.
It could be. Well, we'll check on it. For next week's show, Alex Magoo, CFL. In fact, this might just be the title of today's show. Alex Magoo. Where is Alex Magoo? All right. By next week, hope we didn't even get in the offensive quarter. Next week, maybe we'll have an offensive coordinator that we can chat about. Have fun watching championship games, and we'll convene again next Tuesday. Thanks, boys.
Yep. Sounds good, Puck.
See you, Puck.
Now, there they are, Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree. Tim Booth of the Seattle Times, seattlettimes.com. Go read all of his work there. Not only covers the Seahawks, but does a great job covering everything else. And Curtis Crabtree of Fox 13. That is the Ground Puck Seahawks podcast. Again, find it up on YouTube, a part of the full show of the Daily Puck Drop. When you're there, please subscribe. Also, you can catch it on your audio platforms, Apple and Spotify. And when you're there, please rate the show. Be honest with your rating. 5-star. And write a review. It helps. It helps the algorithm. Please. And so they are up there on Apple and Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Ground Puck Seahawks Podcast, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Big thanks to Georgetown Brewery. Go check out their new tavern beer, domestic style lager, easy drinking lager. Get the very latest a new creation from Georgetown Brewery at georgetownbeer.com. All right, let's wrap up the Daily Puck Drop here for Tuesday, January 21st, and we do it with, of course, Hey, What the Puck, brought to you by Restoration One, proud sponsor of Puck Sports of North Seattle. Your restoration company lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services. Locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when those damages affect your residential or commercial property. I almost had to call them if I didn't get my hose off the backyard spout, because it was going to freeze and then just everything is going to cause damage inside my house. But I got it off. I think I pretty much broke it, but hey, it's off now. Give them a call if you don't take off your hose, you have water damage because you have frozen pipes. They're going to help you out. 206-817-8917. Visit them online. Restoration1.com, the North Seattle franchise. Let me just hit the update on the Ryan Thibodeau as he tracks all the Hall of Fame votes that are coming in. And I'm going to give you the very latest. All right, 54.1% of the ballots have been tallied, and Ichiro is still 100%. Total public plus anonymous votes are in, 212 for Ichiro, and he's trending at 100%. So as of now, He's in. Billy Wagner's going to get in. He's at 85%. CC Sabathia is going to get in. He's at 92.5%. Let's see. Where is Felix? Felix at 24.1. So it's going to be a good debut for Felix Hernandez. We'll see if it improves as it goes on. All right, let's get back to Ichiro. Fascinating figure. One of the best players to ever put on a baseball uniform. And certainly when you think of Ichiro, one of the all-time greats with the Mariners. But also a mystery as a superstar with the Mariners. I wonder if fans, when you think back, really got to know him and understand Ichiro. There wasn't that embrace or connection that most fans get with superstars. You know, most superstars have that connection with their fan base. He did not. I don't know if that matters. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, and I don't think it means to take away what he accomplished here in Seattle or how fans adore him in Seattle. I just always think it could have been more with Ichiro. It could have been even a stronger bond between this fan base and him. Yeah, you hear the stories about his personality and his humor from teammates, and it wants you having more of that from him. Terrific piece written by ESPN.com. Jesse Rogers wrote this great story on him, talking to his former teammates, John Olerud, Mike Sweeney, Mike Cameron. It's fabulous stories. Talked to Chef Jeremy. I know Jeremy very well about what he used to make Ichiro every single day, chicken wings. Chicken wings every day at 5:05 on a night game. And then when they had a getaway game, 2 corn dogs. But also what was the allure with Ichiro was his mystery. His mystery as a ball player, his mystery as a person. I don't know where he ranks in terms of all-time fan favorites in a Mariners uniform. You know, I would have, not the best, as fan favorites, I would have him down on the list. You know, I don't know how far, but, you know, Griffey's number 1 for me. It's Edgar number 2. Felix is number 3. Actually, Felix jumps Edgar for me. Don't kill me. It's Felix 2 for me, then Edgar. And then I go, you know, I love Randy. Randy's one of my all-time greats. Buhner. I mean, I go down before I get to Ichiro. Again, that's just as a fan favorite. It's not as a ball player, because he clearly is the second best ball player that's ever put on a Mariners uniform. But I don't think he's ever beloved like those greats. Maybe I'm wrong. But one thing for sure, no player in Seattle sports history shouldered more pressure to deliver, ever. A weight of a nation and his success was placed squarely on those shoulders. Had he failed, you know, he failed his country, and his country failed because he was the first position player. He most certainly did not fail. He delivered, and he delivered in an exceptional way in baseball. The most unique and interesting player for me that has ever donned a Major League Baseball uniform. He will be inducted, or not inducted, but he will be awarded place in Cooperstown later today. And we'll just see how much of the vote is a unanimous selection coming up later today. 3 o'clock is when the announcement will be made. All right, full daily puck drop is in the books. Again, we podcast the full show for you listeners on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Again, when you're there, please rate the show, give it 5, and write a review. On YouTube, the whole show goes up, and then we'll separate some of the segments. We'll separate Danny Kelly's appearance today. That will be up there separately on the YouTube page. When you're there, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so as of yet. Also, visit pucksports.com. When you're there, sign up to be a Pucks Posse member. You get everything free that we do every single day, plus VIP content, full access to everything, and continued support of Puck Sports. I appreciate everyone that has signed up. It means the world to me. $5 a month. You can sign up. You get a discount if you sign up for a year. So you can do that at pucksports.com. All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Wednesday edition of the show. Rob Staten, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Also, Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times talking a little baseball. Get his perspective on Ichiro and where did Felix land. All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow. As always, promise to be better. Oh. How about we do the show close?
Shoes, no
I do promise to be better.
Would anybody like to smoke some pot?
Yeah. I was born to love you. I lick your face. I was born to rub you, but you were born to rub me first.
What do you need my address for? We'd like to send out a mailer.
Mother of mercy, I don't speak Japanese!